Hello and welcome to part 3 of the interview with Morris Kochanski. What questions are you asked the most?
I guess the most common question is how I became a survival instructor. That's a common question that many questions are often asked, but people are interested how you got into that position, because I think we are few and far between. But basically I would say, how did you become a survival instructor? And they often ask, where did you get your information? Well, I often read books. I have worked with Native people. I've been in the military, but there's nothing as direct as finding good information in books.
I understand you have tried to make a list of survival myths or erroneous ideas. Start with the most common misconceptions.
Well, I think I would say that people not knowing how long the body can go without eating. I think a lot of people, especially when I started, now maybe it's not so bad, figure that they will die of starvation if they don't have anything to eat 2-3 days from now. A lot of people are not aware that many of us could go 40 days with no real harm, and some of us even longer, depending on how overweight we are. But basically most people figure that they've got to live off the land or they can't cope with survival. And so that still persists in the books a great deal, about knowing your edible plants and snaring animals. Many other errors have come up, many interesting ones. One myth is the edible buttons in the Canadian Army uniform. Since buttons were made out of soya bean derivative, they figured that since soybeans are edible, those buttons are edible, but it's not the case. Those buttons are just too much like plastic. Even people figure that stearine candles must be edible because they're made from beef fat. Well, when you take 2 candles and hit them together, they ring, so how can you digest such a thing? The other errors usually are somehow everybody figures make your fires small, and so you can hover over them, save on fuel, and be able to control the fire. And that is a killer, because in the northern forest, to stay warm, your fire has to be so big it forces you to stay a step away, and it uses a prodigious amount of fuel. And there are many little things that creep in, like the reflector fire doesn't reflect. And if you don't know about the science behind reflection, whereas absorption and re-emission is an entirely different thing, and you don't really get the value out of your effort if you're flawed in your insights. Well, the list, usually the list I have is about a typewritten sheet filling one side. One common one, for example, is that you exacerbate dehydration by eating snow. That is probably next to the small fire. I figure it does way more harm than good. Eating snow doesn't take that much energy, and it doesn't make you more thirsty if you persist in doing it, because your body needs the liquids badly. Oh, there are others that could come in, but basically there's things like that. They're very subtle. They're not big, but they are still quite wrong, and many people keep thinking that the right way to do is keep following those old notions that have been corrected, but a lot of people still read old books and keep persisting in bringing them up.
I've been to your place, and I've spent lots of time with you, and we've gone to many used stores and lots of Valley Villages and Goodwills and that, and you're always buying books. How many books do you have related to survival?
Well, I have calculated that in the past were books that are related that I keep on the shelf because I can use them to improve on the knowledge of modern survival and pioneering and bushcraft and all that. And I calculate it must be around 500. There isn't that many good books on the subject. Many of them are books on anthropology and that sort of thing, and probably I would probably have twice that many books related to plants, edible plants, useful plants, but directly to the idea